On the rugged coast of Maine, there was a small, isolated village called Barrow's End. The village was known for its picturesque landscape and abundant fishing grounds. Yet, despite its serene appearance, Barrow's End held a dark secret, one that the villagers seldom spoke of, especially to outsiders. One foggy evening, a young fisherman named Jacob arrived in Barrow's End. Jacob was a seasoned angler, always in search of the next big catch. He had heard whispers of the village's legendary fishing spots and decided to test his luck. The locals were friendly but guarded, offering him only vague advice about where to fish. Determined, Jacob set out early the next morning. He rowed his small boat into the dense fog, heading towards the area the villagers called the Deep. As he navigated the mist, he felt a sense of unease, but he dismissed it as first-time jitters in a new place. Hours passed with no sign of fish. Frustrated, Jacob cast his line one last time. To his surprise, something heavy took the bait. He struggled with the line, battling whatever was on the other end. When he finally pulled it to the surface, he found an old, rusted fishing net entangled with his line. Curious, Jacob hauled the net aboard. Inside, he found an assortment of strange objects, broken pottery, pieces of old rope, and a small, intricately carved wooden box. The box was sealed tight, and despite its age, it seemed to be in remarkably good condition. Jacob's curiosity got the better of him. He pried open the box and found a collection of faded, water-stained letters. They were written by a man named Samuel, who had lived in Barrow's End decades ago. The letters told a chilling tale of Samuel's descent into madness after discovering the secrets of the Deep. According to the letters, Samuel had been a fisherman like Jacob. One day, he ventured too far into the Deep and caught something unnatural. He described it as a fish with human-like eyes and a haunting, almost intelligent gaze. Samuel kept the creature, hoping to understand its origins. However, as days turned into weeks, he began to notice changes in himself. He became paranoid, hearing whispers and seeing shadows that weren't there. Samuel's final letter was the most disturbing. He wrote about a night when the creature spoke to him, promising great wealth and eternal life if he agreed to serve it. Desperate and delirious, Samuel accepted the offer. The next morning, he vanished without a trace, and the creature was gone as well. The villagers found Samuel's boat adrift, with only the letters and the wooden box left behind. As Jacob finished reading, he felt a cold chill run down his spine. He looked around, realizing that the fog had thickened, and the once calm sea was now eerily still. Suddenly, he heard a soft, almost inaudible whisper. It was calling his name. Panic set in. Jacob tried to row back to shore, but his boat wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, and the water around his boat began to ripple. In a moment of clarity, Jacob hurled the wooden box overboard, hoping to break whatever curse he had unleashed. The instant the box hit the water, the fog lifted, and the whispers ceased. Exhausted and terrified, Jacob rowed back to Barrow's End as fast as he could. He never spoke of what happened in the Deep, but the villagers seemed to know. They welcomed him back with solemn nods, their eyes filled with a mix of pity and understanding. Jacob left Barrow's End the next day, vowing never to return. He continued fishing in other places but was always haunted by the memory of that foggy evening. He often wondered if Samuel's fate would have been his own if he had kept the box. The mystery of the deep remained unsolved, a dark secret hidden beneath the waves, waiting for the next curious soul to uncover it. And so, the legend of Barrow's End lived on, a chilling reminder that some secrets are best left buried in the depths. The sun had just begun to set over the horizon, casting a golden glow over Lake Whisper, a remote body of water nestled deep within the wilderness. The lake had a reputation among the locals. They spoke of its serene beauty during the day but warned of the eerie silence that enveloped it at night. Old tales hinted at strange occurrences and whispered voices that floated on the misty air after dark. Jack, an avid fisherman, had heard these stories but dismissed them as mere superstition. He had traveled far to spend a week at the lake, seeking the solitude it offered and the promise of untouched fishing spots. His friend Tom had reluctantly agreed to join him, though he was more skeptical and wary of the lake's eerie reputation. On their first evening, Jack and Tom set out on a small boat, eager to find the perfect fishing spot. The lake was vast, its surface smooth as glass, reflecting the orange and pink hues of the setting sun. As they rowed further from the shore, a dense fog began to roll in, obscuring their surroundings. "This fog is getting pretty thick," Tom remarked, his voice tinged with unease. "Relax, Tom. It's just a bit of mist. Besides, the fish are more active around this time," Jack reassured him, casting his line into the water. The minutes ticked by, and the silence grew more profound. Not a single fish bit. It was as if the lake was devoid of life. Suddenly, Jack's line went taut. He grinned, excitement flooding his veins as he began to reel in his catch. But as he pulled, he felt an unusual resistance. It was heavier than any fish he'd ever caught. With great effort, he hauled the line in, and out of the water emerged a strange, old-fashioned lantern, covered in algae and rust. Jack and Tom exchanged puzzled glances. "What is that doing here?" Tom wondered aloud. "Probably some old relic from the past," Jack replied, though a shiver ran down his spine. He placed the lantern in the boat and continued fishing. Night fell swiftly, and with it, the temperature dropped. The fog thickened, and an unsettling stillness settled over the lake. The men decided to head back to their campsite, but as they turned the boat, a faint, melodic humming filled the air. It was a haunting tune, soft and distant, yet unmistakably there. "Do you hear that?" Tom asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Yeah, but it's probably just the wind," Jack replied, though he was far from convinced. As they rowed back, the humming grew louder, more insistent. It seemed to emanate from the very depths of the lake. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. The fog swirled around them, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. Suddenly, the boat jerked to a stop. Jack looked over the edge and saw something pale and ghostly in the water. He leaned closer, squinting through the fog. To his horror, a face stared back at him. It was a woman, her eyes wide open, her expression frozen in terror. "Tom! Look!" Jack shouted, but when Tom looked, the face had vanished. "You're seeing things, Jack. Let's just get out of here," Tom urged, panic rising in his voice. They rowed furiously, the humming now a cacophony of voices whispering unintelligible words. The fog pressed in on them, cold and damp. Just as they neared the shore, the boat capsized, and they were plunged into the icy water. Jack struggled to the surface, gasping for air. He called out for Tom but received no reply. Desperation took hold as he swam to the overturned boat. There, clinging to the edge, he saw Tom, his face pale and eyes wide with fear. "We need to get out of here, now," Jack screamed. As they pulled themselves onto the boat, the voices grew louder, now sounding like a mournful choir. The water around them began to churn, and from its depths, shadowy figures emerged, their hands reaching out as if to drag them down. With a final burst of strength, Jack and Tom rowed to the shore, collapsing onto the muddy bank. The voices faded, replaced by the eerie silence once more. They looked back at the lake, now shrouded in an impenetrable mist, and knew they had escaped something far more sinister than they could comprehend. As dawn broke, they packed their belongings and left Lake Whisper, vowing never to return. The lantern, now lying forgotten on the shore, flickered once before its light went out, leaving only the silent depths of the lake behind. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon when Mark and his best friend, Tom, decided to cast their lines into the still waters of Blackwater Lake. Known for its large, elusive catfish, the lake was a favorite among local anglers. However, it was also shrouded in eerie tales and whispered rumors of strange happenings. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Tom asked, his voice betraying a hint of unease. "Come on, Tom," Mark laughed. "We've fished here dozens of times. Those stories are just that, stories." They set up their gear on the creaky old pier, the wood groaning under their weight. The night was unusually quiet, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. As they settled in, casting their lines into the inky depths, a dense fog began to roll in, swallowing the lake and its surroundings. Hours passed with only the occasional nibble. The silence was almost oppressive. Just as Tom was about to suggest packing up, Mark's rod bent sharply. "Got one," he exclaimed, reeling in with all his might. The struggle was intense, the fish pulling with a force that seemed almost supernatural. Tom watched in awe as Mark fought to bring his catch to the surface. Finally, with one last heave, a massive catfish broke through the water, its scales glistening in the moonlight. "That's the biggest one I've ever seen," Tom gasped. As they wrestled the fish onto the pier, Mark noticed something odd. The catfish had strange markings on its body, almost like runes or symbols. Its eyes, instead of the usual dull black, glowed with an unnatural light. A chill ran down his spine. "Maybe we should let it go," Tom suggested, sensing the same unease. But Mark was adamant. "No way. This is a trophy catch. Besides, it's just a fish." Reluctantly, Tom agreed, and they secured the catfish in a large cooler. As they began to pack up their gear, a low, guttural growl emanated from the lake. The water rippled, as if something massive was moving beneath the surface. "Did you hear that?" Tom whispered, his eyes wide with fear. Mark nodded, suddenly feeling very vulnerable. The growl came again, louder this time, and the fog thickened, reducing their visibility to mere feet. The air grew colder, and the scent of rot became overpowering. "We need to leave now," Mark said, his voice shaking. They hurriedly gathered their things and made their way back to their truck. As they drove away, the fog seemed to follow them, clinging to the vehicle like a living entity. The growling continued, echoing through the trees. Back at Mark's house, they unloaded their gear and brought the cooler inside. The catfish lay still, its strange eyes now closed. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that they had disturbed something ancient and powerful. "Let's just get some rest and deal with it in the morning," Mark suggested, though sleep was the last thing on his mind. That night, Mark was jolted awake by a loud crash. He rushed downstairs to find the cooler overturned, the catfish gone. The front door was wide open, and muddy footprints led out into the darkness. "Tom! Wake up!" Mark shouted, but there was no response. Panicking, Mark searched the house, but Tom was nowhere to be found. The footprints outside seemed to grow larger, transforming into something monstrous. Trembling, Mark followed them, the growling now a constant, menacing presence. The trail led him back to Blackwater Lake, where the fog had lifted, revealing the still, dark waters. At the edge of the pier, Mark saw Tom standing, staring into the depths. His eyes were vacant, his face pale. "Tom, what are you doing?" Mark called out, but his friend didn't respond. Suddenly, Tom turned, his eyes glowing with the same unnatural light as the catfish. "You shouldn't have taken it," he said in a voice that was not his own. Before Mark could react, something massive erupted from the lake, dragging Tom into the water with a force that left no chance for rescue. Mark stood frozen in terror as the growling ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. Days later, when the authorities arrived, they found no trace of Tom. Mark's story was dismissed as the ramblings of a traumatized man. But Mark knew the truth. Blackwater Lake held secrets that were never meant to be disturbed, and he would never fish there again. And so, the legend of Blackwater Lake grew, a warning to all who dared to seek its depths. Some say, on foggy nights, you can still hear the growling, and see the glow of eyes just beneath the surface, waiting for the next unwary soul to venture too close.